Hello and welcome to today's edition of the BME Horizon Hot Topics webinar. I am Borbála Schenk, the Chief European Research Funding Advisor of the Budapest University of Technology and Economics. Budapest University of Technology and Economics is a leading institution in providing training and conducting research in the fields of technology, natural science and economics. We have over 20,000 students with more than 1,200 academic staff. And in the Age 2020 framework program, the Budapest University of Technology and Economics ranked second as the most successful Hungarian institutions. Our key research areas include ICT, artificial intelligence, sustainable energy, accumulator technologies, vehicle technology, biotechnology, nanophysics, disaster prevention, among other fields. This weekly webinar is brought to you by the Center for University Industry Cooperation of the University of BME. This center is responsible for organizing, coordinating, and strengthening the innovation-related activities of the university with a wide competence of activities ranging from project management to knowledge transfer, startup incubation, and among others, supporting the researchers of the university in their successful participation in the Horizon Europe Framework Program. We have started this webinar in November 2021 with the aim of creating discussion and showing interesting perspectives on the new research trends that define the new and reformed European research area as reflected in the Horizon Europe Framework Program. We are live streaming these webinars every week on Mondays at 1 o'clock on our webpage, horizon.bme.hu/webinars. And the recordings of the sessions can be watched later on the same page. We have covered many topics since the first session. We have dealt with interesting perspectives on open science, societal impact, research ethics, living lab approaches, and we are going to tackle a very exciting topic today as well, which will be an open science field again. We are going to listen to the approach of the Eurac Research Institute from Bolzano, Italy, how they incentivize open science on the level of the institution. And we are going to add the twist to the discussion because we are going to see the researcher's perspective as well. We are going to hear the experiences of a researcher who has just been awarded with the Institute's Open Science Research Award. Please use Slido for questions. We are going to have a Q&A session after the presentations. We are really interested in your opinion, your comments, your questions. Please use Slido. The Slido is embedded on the horizon.bme.hu webinar page. And if you are following us on YouTube, you can find the Slido link and the code how you can use this platform, and you can even upvote questions besides asking your own questions. So today I'm going to present to you our first guest speaker, who is Liise Lehtsalu. Liise is a research support officer in Eurac Research. Her work focuses on coordinating and supporting open science and research data management strategy and policy development, as well as supporting researchers with open science related issues in their research projects, from the proposal phase throughout the project implementation. Liise has a PhD in history from Brown University in the US and an MA in Library and Information Services Management from the University of Sheffield in the UK. So, Liise, I'm going to give you the floor now. Please share your slides, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. I think you should be seeing my slides now.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction and obviously the invitation.
Sorry, Liise. Now we do not see the slides.
Doing what I told you before that it's been doing. It should jump back in 3 seconds, and it will be there when I change the slide.
Okay. Okay, no
I'm
problem.
sorry, so you just don't see my title slide. Thank you again for the invitation. And as Borbala said, I'll be talking very briefly about the approach to open science that we have taken here at Eurac. Just a quick question. Do you see just a black screen or do you see my Teams?
We see the black screen now. Could you try to...
Okay. Then it should be fine. Eurac, I'll shift the next slide so you don't see my black screen. There it is, I think. Eurac is a research performing organization in Bolzano, Italy, and our researchers work in areas of social sciences, engineering, medical sciences, and environmental sciences. We are quite small, about 550 researchers, so definitely small compared to the Budapest University. And our researchers are organized in thematic research institutes, and currently there are 15 different research institutes that are then supported by several central services like, for example, the Research Support Office or ICT or Legal Office or the Eurac Library. I work in the Research Support Office, which is the office in Eurac that is coordinating open science at organizational level. The reasons for that I'll touch upon in a second. But to begin, I wanted to provide a very quick definition of open science, especially because there's so many different definitions out there. Here I've copied the European Commission's definition, which I like because it focuses on the scientific process. So open science is a way of doing research. It seeks to increase transparency and efficiency of the research process, supporting also the reproducibility and credibility of research. And I've also included here a graphic from the recent UNESCO recommendations on open science. This graphic highlights well the many aspects and areas that comprise open science. And in order to be transparent and efficient throughout the research process, from the idea through project development and execution to bringing the results to end users, researchers need to draw and rely on many different tools, knowledge bases, and skills. And this means that there are many different stakeholders to open science. So within a research organization, these stakeholders can include obviously researchers, but also research departments or faculties, various research support offices, like, for example, the grants office, IT, a library, repositories that might be present in the institution, legal office or tech transfer offices, senior management or rectorate, ethics review boards, and so on. So open science is not something that a researcher can do on their own, but rather it requires collaboration, because it is the whole research process that it involves. In Eurac, we have tried to adopt a very democratic and bottom-up approach to open science, and to coordinate activities and to develop institutional strategies and policies. We have called into existence two working groups, the Open Access Working Group and the Research Data Management Working Group. Both working groups are coordinated by the Research Support Office. And the Research Support Office has taken this coordinating role because open science as an overarching topic entered Eurac Research through third-party funding, in particular European Commission funding. And as funders have increasingly introduced policies and recommendations around open science, we in the Research Support Office have had to keep up and understand these policies, and to support our researchers with understanding the requirements and helping them to comply with those requirements. For us, this has meant increasing our office capacity on the topic through continued professional development, but also through some personnel decisions. We have also understood that in order to really introduce open science to Eurac and encourage our researchers to adopt open science methods, our work has to go beyond third-party funded projects. So those working groups that we have, we work together with all the relevant stakeholders with the aim to make sure that our organizational level activities cover the needs of all researchers. We also want to avoid duplication of efforts and make sure that initiatives taken by researchers or research groups or whole research institutes are used as examples, as best practices within the organization, and escalated and applied at the organizational level. So we have, first of all, we have the Open Access Working Group, which brings together researchers, the library, and the Research Support Office. And in this working group, the main focus is on developing policies, but also training and support mechanisms that would encourage and help our researchers to publish their research articles in open access. We have an institutional open access policy and ask that researchers deposit a copy of their peer-reviewed journal articles in our institutional repository. As of last year, as of 2021, we also have in place an internal open access fund, which seeks to round up existing funding for open access that our researchers have access to, and support in particular our researchers with publishing open access book chapters and books. And I think we've been actually quite successful with open access up until now. In 2021, 75% of all our peer-reviewed journal articles, so all peer-reviewed journal articles published by our researchers, were available in open access. We also have the Research Data Management Working Group, which was convened after the Research Support Office completed the Eurac Research Data Survey in 2017. In the survey, we aim to have an overview of what types of and what volumes of data our researchers are working with and how they manage those data. And based on the survey, we convened a broad-based working group that brings together researchers, the IT, the legal office, and the research support office with the aim to develop a research data strategy for Eurac and coordinate research data related services. The working group first completed a more in-depth audit of research data related services in Eurac, and based on those results, developed a research data management roadmap for Eurac. And the roadmap is really a coordinating tool that brings together different stakeholders and establishes a common work plan and common objectives for data management service development. In the first roadmap, we mostly focus on training, strategy development, and infrastructure related objectives. And finally, I would like to also say that in addition to the two working groups, there's also continuous exchange between researchers, the research support, and our internal training department, to ensure also that we offer really all the necessary training as much as we can in-house, and continued professional development opportunities to help and to provide our researchers with the tools to engage and practice open science. So this year, for example, our trainings focus on, among other things, on topics related to ethics in artificial intelligence, ethics of data sharing, data management planning, fair data, and so on. Beyond the work that we do in the two working groups, the Research Support Office also tries to make sure that we keep topics related to open science present in our researchers' mind. So we use our internal communication platform, which is Facebook for Work or Workplace, to share information and news, to advertise training offerings that either we ourselves or that other organizations or European projects are organizing and offering, and that we consider useful to our researchers. We also recently have worked together with our communications department to introduce open science related content to Eurac blogs. We have a blog platform, and so we try to introduce open science related topics there, and to public outreach materials on social media channels. And this really is to make open science as present as possible inside the organization, to raise awareness and to offer our researchers frequent opportunities to familiarize themselves with the topic and to learn relevant skills. And the last thing I would like to briefly mention is that last year the Research Support Office also introduced the Open Research Award, and we'll hear from one of the winners later. The idea of the award was to recognize the work that many of our researchers are already doing with open science methods and furthering open science methods. And unfortunately, developing and applying open science practices is still often not recognized in the current systems of research evaluation. So we wanted to make sure that at least internally we recognize and highlight the work that our researchers are doing, and that we encourage other of our researchers to follow that example. So researchers could either nominate their colleagues or they could nominate themselves for the award. We received 9 incredibly strong nominations across all the research disciplines in Eurac. And we had planned to award 2 awards, but our international jury asked us to consider awarding more. So we ended up awarding 4 awards, including 2 early career awards. And we really used this occasion to highlight the work of the nominees and the winners. We had like a ceremony, a big ceremony, or as big as we could do during the pandemic. And we worked together also with our communications office to offer the winners a spotlight and highlight their work through Eurac, but also beyond, so that that they would really that researchers feel that their efforts are noticed and appreciated when it comes to open science. So this is a bit about our approach that we have taken and the encouragement we try to provide to our researchers. And now Barbara, I think, will introduce one of our researchers, Alberto, who will talk a bit from the researcher's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much, Liise. I think that we should handle the questions after Alberto's presentation, okay? We have received quite a few, but now I would like to introduce Alberto, our second guest today. Alberto Scotti is a freshwater ecologist at Eurac Research. He conducted his studies in Milan during his bachelor studies and in Copenhagen during his master studies. Bachelor, he has a degree in agricultural sciences and a master in nature management. He has completed his PhD at the University of Innsbruck with a thesis focusing on how to assess global and climatic changes using aquatic macroinvertebrates. There's a tongue twister for me in the introduction, as bioindicators, which is of course open access. And before joining Eurac Research, he also acquired experience in public and rural policy, working at the autonomous province of Bolzano, Bolzano. Currently, he is in charge of coordinating and executing all the activities dealing with water at the Institute for Alpine Environment at Eurac Research. So Alberto, I would now give you the floor to present the researcher's perspective.
Thanks for the introduction. And yes, I will now provide some examples of what is basically my routine in doing science within the framework that Liise presented a few minutes ago. So my idea is to try to give some ideas, some practical example of how, as a scientist, you can turn science into open science. So first of all, also because you mentioned it a few seconds ago, what are these macroinvertebrates? This is quite important to explain because it's the data that I produce and I work on, but it will be very, very brief. So they are water bug, because in this case I work in the water environment, that we can see with our eye. And the process of working with these macroinvertebrates is quite long, because you have to collect them, you have to clean them from sand or from algae, from whatever they are hidden in. You have to identify them, and then you finally have your taxa list that after a month of work is just the starting point of a research. This is how they look like. Some examples, you can see how different they are in shapes and colors. And it is actually what is the taxa list. So it's simply a list where you have the animals, how many animals you have collected, and when and where. So this is an output that takes a month of work and is basically just an Excel sheet or something similar. Also because the main aim as scientists basically is to end up with this. So a scientific article, possibly published in a good journal, and so on. But we all know how much work there is behind this final output. So when I started to work also during my PhD, I was trying to think, okay, but how can I share my work even before arriving to this final article? Can I do something? How can I do that? And basically the recipe we can say that I found was to turn 1 in 3. So this this scientific article, the classic that we all know, divided it in three different moments. So first of all, I decided that I could publish the raw data. So Pangea is a very well-known data repository for all the data in regards to earth and environmental science. And all the data that I produced, so basically the taxa list you saw before, for whatever study I do, is published in Pangea. And then, of course, depending on the studies, there are some studies that are really worth to be, or data that are really worth to be explained a little bit more. So I also started to publish data papers where I can explain a little bit better the data, how they were collected in a very detailed way, where they were collected, and also a little bit giving some small highlights of potential of reusal of this data. And then finally, we have the scientific papers we all know. But as you can see in this process, the scientific papers are actually just the last step of a process that has started far before with the sharing of the raw data. So here we have talked about the what can we share? But we can also share with the scientific community or with colleagues how we do the work. So an example is if you are using, for example, methodologies that are particularly interesting or are very new in your field, you can think about writing a methods paper, a methodology paper. So, for example, in my field, this is a very well-known journal whose aim is just the one of publishing methodologies or particular methods that are used for some specific analysis. And the other aspect is that you you analyze the data. So if you have developed a nice workflow for analyzing your data, or you have some code that could be valuable and interesting also for your colleagues, you can share your code, your R code or your Python code on, for example, GitHub. And this is something that we also started to do last year. So try to also share not only the data, not only what this data, where they come from, how you can reuse them, but also how to process them. And how we arrive at the analyses that then are published in the scientific paper. And okay, I can't. Okay, good. And maybe one can also ask himself, okay, but how can I assess how good I am in sharing data, in apply or trying to apply an open access culture, also for myself, because this is something that is sometimes is a little bit not considered, but the first person that for which you do this open science thing is yourself. So there are some tools. So, for example, there is this tool which can test how fair your data sets are. What does fair mean? This is an example. So this is the name of the tool. If you are interested to try it out or check it. And this is a data set that I uploaded on Pangea as all my data set. And you can see that the acronym FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And in this case, this dataset that was uploaded on Pangea scored 91 points out of 100. So was a pretty good thing. And with this tool, you can test your dataset to see how fair it is. There is also a detailed report where you can then read it and try to understand where you can get better in which parts of these 4 areas. And also you can kind of test yourself through this tool. That is a very easy tool, and interesting, very interesting. It is called Impact Story. For using this, you need a Twitter account and also an ORC-ID number. And it's very interesting because you access to the website with these 2 information. And then this is, for example, an extract of my profile. You can see that you have, first of all, you know your publications, if they were retweeted or shared on social media or in newspaper, by whom, how many times. And then you can have some small, some achievements that are very interesting because they tell you also a lot about your kind of open access culture. So you can see here, like the first achievement, Open Hero, because all my papers are free to read online, or 100% of my research is free to read online, and so on. You have different achievements, and it's also a nice thing, almost a little game, but that tells you a lot about your research, how much is impactful, and also in regards to the open access, how open it is. So summing up, nowadays, work that is not a common scientific paper is valuable, because think about how many data we collect, and can be valorized as well with for example, as I showed you before, sharing your data, describe them in a data paper, sharing your data analysis workflow, your methodologies, and so on. So they're not scientific paper as they are commonly perceived, but inside the scientific community, this still has value. So within institutions and scientific community. And this, as I was saying before, it's very important also for yourself, from your personal and professional opportunities. For example, I'm currently involved in 4 international projects, and this happened just sharing my data. So not doing anything more than just sharing. I had the data already from my analysis, and I say, okay, why don't I share them? And this led to these very big, interesting collaborations, global collaborations. And as also Liise said before, institutions are paying more and more attention to open science aspects, not only because some of the actions are basically mandatory for managing some projects or money, but also as a general aspect. And last but not least, there is also a moral value of sharing data, meaning that, first of all, the work you do is much more transparent for everybody to check on it, or to really understand the processes behind. And I personally, I see this as a very important point, especially in these days where science and society are not very well connected. And then we also have to remember that most of us can do our money and do their job through public fundings in the very end. So this is also something I think fair to share all the scientific processes with all the people that could potentially be interested in that. With this, I've concluded my presentation, and I'm also open for questions together with Liise.
Thank you very much, Alberto. That was very interesting. I am just going to share the Slido tab now, but let me just share it. We have received quite many questions. Yeah, I would like to have a confirmation. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Great. Okay. At first, I just would like to go to this question. Alberto, you have partly answered this question. What is your primary motivation to do open science? But could you just elaborate very shortly on the point you made that the mere sharing of your data brought you into research collaborations? Yeah. So in a way, sometimes the fact of doing open science is seen as a very altruistic thing to do. But at the end can also be quite self-centric, let's say, because as I said before, it's not that much effort to share this data because you already have on your computer, and once you know how to do it, you organize the data already from the beginning in a way that is then easier to be shared, for which they are easier to be shared. And overall, especially for us at Eurac, that we are quite small as an institution, and we do many different things, so you don't have many colleagues that share your research interest. And it's very important to do this process for me, because that allows me to then make contacts, make networking with other research groups in other countries, in other research institutions, and so on. So at the end, the effort I put in sharing this data comes back to me with interest of 10 times, let's say. So really giving me the opportunity to know more and better my research field, get to know new people, and so on. Thank you very much.
Can I just add to that very briefly? Because Alberto also, during his presentation, mentioned another motivation that I find personally very interesting and valid, and that more researchers actually say, is that first and foremost, you do it for yourself, especially with data, because managing your data and sharing your data in a repository means that your data is in a safe space, first and foremost for yourself to find in the future, and not on a computer hard drive where it will be potentially lost, or is usually also somewhat disorganized, so that when the researcher returns to it in a couple of years, they don't themselves know anymore what it is about or how to approach it. So I think I would just like to highlight also that motivation that Alberto said during his talk, and I think is very valid. There's this nice saying in the research data management world that research data management first and foremost is a gift to yourself, and only then comes everything else. Okay, thank you. Question for you, Liise. As an institution, are you concentrating mostly on the open access and the data management aspects of open science? Yes, at the moment, yes. Also because, as I said during my presentation, that for us, the focus on open science is really coming from the requirements. And this is where the funding requirements are the strongest. Obviously, now we're also increasingly trying to support our researchers with citizen science. And we see an increasing interest among our researchers to engage in citizen science or collaborative participative design projects more and more. And during my presentation, I mentioned that one of our approaches is this constant exchange between researchers, research support and training department, And there, for example, for this year, something that was asked quite a bit by our researchers was exactly training on citizen science aspects. So we're not as structured on those aspects as we are with open access and research data management. But within our capacities and means, we also try to support obviously the other aspects, and also extending out from there to research integrity and research ethics, and also those aspects of open science.
Thank you, Alberto. If you have anything to add here about citizen science, just please feel free to intervene, or the other parts of like opening up the research process from your perspective.
No, I think here what Liise was very clear.
Okay, thank you very much. What are the bottom-up elements of the institutional open science practice? This is also a question for Liise. You mentioned that you have a top-down and bottom-up approach.
So really, what it is that we try to take this approach where we, so to say, co-create. So very open science of us. We co-create our strategy and policy as much as possible with the end users, which would be our researchers, and all the stakeholders involved, and so those are the working groups. So we have decided quite consciously not to have the policies and strategies developed in a small circle in a closed room, but rather take a more inclusive and democratic approach, which obviously has the drawback that things take more time. It would be faster to do it in a closed room, in a closed circle of people. But our hope here is that the actual implementation and adoption of the direction taken is better if we co-create. And this way, we're also able to really make sure that we understand where our researchers are, what their needs are, and how we as an organization can support them with, not only policy, but also with infrastructure and the training environment and any other support that they might need.
Thank you. I think that the last question that would go to both of you would be our last one. The question is, what are the needs of researchers regarding open science in your practice? So what are the everyday needs and requests you in the research management phase, and you, Alberto, as a researcher, has towards the research support?
Maybe I'll let Alberto start and then I'll go from there.
Yeah, from my point of view, if you are a researcher, you need a motivation to do something, because otherwise the normal answer you have, if you go to a researcher and saying you must share this data, I have no time, I can't spend my time on this. So for this aspect, I would say that first it's important that through different activities, researchers are aware of the benefits of doing this. And it's very true, and I experienced it on myself, that you don't get completely this aspect until you do it. This is very, very true. But from the other side of point of view also, maybe who is in charge, and is maybe a manager or a director of an institute, or can try to evaluate a little bit more the time that is spent on this thing. That at the beginning is an investment, but then it comes back very, very, very soon. It comes back.
Thank you. Liise?
I would start that, first of all, the needs of researchers are very different depending on their discipline. So obviously, in Alberto's case, we've heard from an environmental scientist perspective, and I'm fairly sure if we had a social scientist speaking, it would be a slightly different perspective. But I think what Alberto touched upon, the motivation. And there, I think also some, as Alberto said, the recognition from the organization side, whether it be the research institute and within the institute structure, the more senior researchers recognizing the value of doing this work and allowing, and I quite deliberately use the verb allowing the researchers, more junior researchers, to engage in this practice and encouraging the junior researchers to engage in this practice, I think is very important. But before researchers can start engaging in open science, I think they need to understand what open science is, because I think there's still a lot of confusion about what open science is, and to have the skills of actually practice open science. And there, what Alberto said about benefits, I think is also true for skills. You can only do that many courses, but to really practice open science, I think it takes a bit of a leap of faith and just to jump into it and start doing it, and making some perhaps mistakes that cost some time at the beginning, but then pay off in the long term. So learning the skills is definitely a need. Understanding how to apply open science within your particular discipline is a need. And in some disciplines, there still is no agreed upon way or no established way of doing open science. And here, obviously, more technical or more sciencey, natural science disciplines are a bit further ahead than social sciences and humanities are. But slowly in all disciplines, there are best practices and common standards emerging for all aspects of open science. So from publishing to data and methods management to citizen science. So it's understanding also the particularities of your institute, and then I think here training again and senior researchers training younger researchers. It's a key aspect.
Thank you very much, Liise and Alberto. You have made several very important points, which we will definitely take into consideration in our open science journey. And thank you very much for being our guest today and sharing your thoughts and experiences. We wish you a great luck in your future endeavors in open science. And let me just share for a moment what topic we are going to continue with. Next week, we are going to do some more open science from the data management perspective. Our guest will be Daniel Spichtinger, who is an open science specialist, and we will talk about fair data management, which we had a great background for in Alberto's and Liise's presentation today. So thank you very much for being with us, and see you next week, same time. Goodbye.